Symone Walters identifies first as a proud mother of three amazing children and a grandmother of two inspirational grandchildren, then as a community activist, leader, and mentor. Tragically, in the summer of 2013, Symone lost her youngest son, Taj Lure Walters, to gun violence. He was 15 years old. She has vowed to turn tragedy into inspiration and has reoriented her career to one that is entirely dedicated to eradicating systemic anti-Black racism and gun violence amongst the Black community. In her most recent role with the Toronto Community Benefits Network, using a trauma-informed restorative practices and anti-Black racism approach, she established the 3-year funded Next Gen Builders Mentoring Program for Black youth into the trades, a community labor and industry partnership to increase diversity and inclusion in the construction industry. Her expertise in using the trauma-informed restorative practices and anti-Black racism model has led her to venture out to develop her own business focused on creating, facilitating, and supporting strategies focused on the well-being of the Black community with a vision to see her community thrive. With this focus, she has developed a project to address a gentrification and Black displacement crisis arising from major planning and infrastructure projects. She leads the project in partnership with the City of Toronto, as well as others, to create awareness and increase civic action amongst Black members of the community, ensuring a cultural placemaking process to community development is established. With the same principle, she is also collaborating and advocating with members of the community to build on the legacy of her son, to develop a restorative hub geared towards youth that embodies a safe, holistic space and place for growth. Land is being secured and a design modeled. All her work is rooted in a path towards a higher journey. Taj, Tahj. So today, Symone is going to be talking to us about community, parts that make the whole. And just a little intro to the talk before I give it to Symone. It's important to recognize there are many parts to a community. Symone will speak to ways we can recognize all these parts so we can do our very best as agencies in both service and solidarity. So thank you, Symone. I'm really looking forward to this talk and for you to share your expertise.
Thank you both. I'm just going to start sharing my screen if that's okay. Give me 1 second.
And maybe I'll just say here, everyone, this talk will be recorded. So if you would prefer not to be recorded, feel free to turn off your video. And if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat and there will be time for conversation after Symone's presentation.
Okay. So thank you, Sri, and thank you, Omar, and thank you all of you for attending today's session. I really want to give a recognition to this TNC retreat. I think this is a really valuable space for all of us. We are all guests here, though I am speaking with you all today. I am also speaking, wanting to learn from all of you in the spaces that you are in within your communities. As Omar said, I began this work really because I had lost my son 7 years ago, and I wanted to engage with system changes. I wanted to use my experiences. I wanted to use the value that I've learned just through being raised in a very, isolated situation. Very, very daunting childhood, very daunting adulthood. Up until a few years ago. And so I really wanted to impact the changes that happen within community. And so this is where it all began. And I've had now a great career to be able to do this in a way that brings value to myself, but also grounds me in everything that I do and everything that I share with others. And so I hope it does the same for you today as I go through this presentation with you. I usually like to start with this quote here because it's one that grounds me also in everything that I do. So I'll just share it with you. Every child has the ability to write their own life story, but without members of the community who are committed to making a change, many of their stories will end in tragedy. Though we may not be able to save all youth, we are determined not to ever give up on any of them, and therefore we'll always continue our work towards a higher journey. And this is a quote that I've created and use all the time in honor of my son, because I realized that, youth may be in situations that we won't be able to save all of them. But as long as we are determined to do the best that we can do to support the ones that we can save or help to build or help to push forward, I think that should be credited to all of us in a way that we know we've done our very best. So again, this topic, I believe the retreat topic is sustaining relationships, inspiration, regeneration. And so how do we create better reciprocal relationships with those who we work with? And my discussion today is really around community parts and the different parts of community. And so I'll just bring you through a few presentation slides and then and to lay the foundation, and then I want us to have an actual open conversation. I want to start off by asking my first question today with to all of you is how have you defined your communities? And I've broken it down into 4 different groups today, though there are many more. But just in terms of timing and conversation for today, I've broken it down into these 4 groups. So there are organizations and agencies who support your work. There are clients, participants, residents. I'm not sure what you call your particular groups who engage in programming. And then there are clients, participants, residents who do not engage in programming. And then there's yourself. A lot of times when we talk about community, we don't include ourselves. We don't include ourselves in terms of how have we situated ourselves in communities? How do we see ourselves in those communities? And so the second question I would ask is, how have you positioned yourself in your community? Are others aware of your services? How easy is it to access your services? But most importantly, have you woven yourself into the community fabric? And how much do you know about the community you work in? Every community has its own essence. Every community comes with its own needs, its own challenges, its own culture, its own assets, its own liabilities. Everything is different for every single community. And I know for most services, a lot of people see services and then they see themselves. They don't see a connection between the two. And so I ask the question only because sometimes even as service providers, we see ourselves different from those who we serve. Maybe because we don't live in the community, maybe because we come and go, maybe because our work within the community, we're at the head of the organization, not necessarily frontline workers. But then how do you see yourselves in terms of how you've been able to build yourself through the community fabric, which is extremely important. The third question I would ask is, what is your relationship with each of these groups? So whether it comes to whether it's the organizations that you work with, whether it's the clients that you serve, or whether it's clients that you hope to serve, what have those relationships been like? And those relationships need to be defined if any of our work is going to be successful and make changes on any level. So being able to identify expectations, responsibilities, but also needs to be defined per client based on their ability to meet those expectations. So if it's a young person who is in the program but has been going through a lot of different challenges, what are the expectations of that particular client versus a client who may be able to vibrantly be a part of your programming? So for organizations, your relationship is usually with youth workers, shelter workers, case workers, et cetera. You all work together for initial touch point. But I'm going to challenge that you all go further by building your own relationships with clients and participants. Don't expect to know your client through the eyes of someone else. And also the responsibility of another organization is to give you information, but not relationship. So when you've identified the responsibility of an organization, really, what does that look like? Have you relied fully on what an organization has given you based off of their interpretation or their understanding of the needs of this client? Or have you taken the time to really engage in what this client needs, aside from the paperwork or the initial touch point that you have been given through your fellow organizations? So when it comes to the clients, participants, and residents that you do serve, how much trust have you built with that client? How safe does your client feel with being open and honest with you? If your client is facing homelessness or has been arrested or is being abused, does your client feel safe enough to come and speak to you about those instances, so that if there are needs that you aren't able to meet, that there are connections that you can make. And I remember even for the program that I still run, I co-created in TCBN when I was there 2 years ago. And it was really about serving Black youth who were getting into construction industry, and how it was that we were receiving information from them saying how difficult it was for them to stay in the industry because of the mounting racism, the sexism, all of those things that were happening. And so we created this program. I remember when we had clients that would come in, and we had clients coming from East Scarborough, we had clients coming from Mississauga, we had clients coming from Jane and Finch, we had clients coming from Rexdale, and it was a little bit challenging for me, because I knew that depending on what area a client or a participant came from could be detrimental, bringing them all into one space. And so as the developer of this program and as the leader of the program, I had to figure out what kind of relationships was I going to build with those who were farthest from or had to deal with the challenges that they were facing, versus the ones who could easily drive around the city and feel safe enough to come into different neighborhoods and different areas. How was I going to make sure that I was building relationships with each of them to make sure that they were getting the value they needed to get out of the programming? And then those clients who are hardest to reach, the potential clients that you wish to serve, the ones who don't participate in programming and don't come to your doorstep asking for support or asking for help. What are some of the existing relationships that this individual might have that can allow you to build on your own? So even when I work within my community, I do a lot of work in Jane and Finch because that's where I was born and raised and absolutely love, though I don't live there anymore, but absolutely love working in Jane and Finch. And there are some youth who, they may not be forthcoming with certain information. I may have to take more time to do that. But I use the relationships of their friends to sort of get to them. And I sort of create a circle. This is where my restorative practice hats comes in, and I create a circle of conversation. And it doesn't matter what the conversation is. It's really what they want to talk about. And I create that circle to make sure that as I'm building on existing relationships that I may have with their friends, I'm also building that rapport with them indirectly, first and foremost. And then I can be able to move away from the friendship base that they've used as a safe support and be able to build my own relationship with them. And so that's how I've been able to sort of go around those harder to reach, those ones that don't talk very much, those ones that are very, not feeling safe about coming out about certain things. And so what are the unique challenges of those individuals that must be considered when seeking to provide your service or program? So there's a challenge that, I've just been arrested for something that I may be going to jail for in a few months, or I may have court for in a few weeks. What are those challenges that those individuals might have that prevent a real connection between yourself and that client? And so when supporting any client, you are more than likely going to encounter many aspects of their social determinants of health. And we all know what those are: housing, food insecurity, racism, abuse. We don't know. There's mounting issues why a harder to reach young person may be distant in terms of building building your relationship with that particular client. And then there's you. So how much are you willing to invest in these relationships? How much more can you do? Is there anything more than that you can do? Is there more investment that you can safely make within reason? And you will never be effective if you have no connection. Sometimes we think that youth don't connect because they just don't want to, but more often than none, our participants don't connect because they're unable to. Whether that's mental health issues, whether that's their life issues, whatever issues is confronting them. And so is there more that you can do to invest in those participants? My fourth question would be, what are the powers and privileges of each group? And how does this influence your engagement with each group? So this is extremely important to identifying power imbalances within the community, because a lot of times, even for myself, I've done a lot of work in my community, and I've been able to work with, groups that have more power in the community. And so in my past, in building this community hub project for the last 5 years, I believe it is, I've had to deal with power imbalances within my community. And so there was a group that had started this project, and I was a part of them. That was an all-white seniors group, and they were homeowners in the community, and they had a lot of access to government. They had a lot of access to financial powers. They had a lot of access that many of us in the community don't have or didn't have, and so they used that to lead this project without considering the fact that there may be people who need these access, need a pathway to these accesses, and should be brought along the path. Unfortunately, that didn't happen as well as we would have hoped. But though they weren't organizations, they were actually residents. Though they weren't powers in terms of numbers, they were individuals. They had the power of being white, homeowners, and easy and access to privilege, access to power. So when it comes to organizations and we talk about privilege and powers, a lot of them come in referrals, and that's just what I'm assuming in terms of when you work with organizations. How does the information you receive in a referral reflect your engagement with the client? Do you engage with a perceived bias based on the information in the referral, or how do you ensure your relationship with the client is unique to that client? So clients may come to you through a referral, and you receive all the information about them, and sometimes we use that information to judge the particular client without getting to know what are the real issues, or who this client really is, getting to build that relationship with this client, which is extremely important. And so whether it's youth involved in the criminal justice system, homelessness, or connected to gang violence, are there things that we perceive before we even get to know this client? For the clients that we do work with, and as you identify them, whose voice is being heard over another? And are these voices the prominent ones? So again, you have youth who are more outgoing, more forthcoming, will have conversations with you, open and honest, follow up in timely manners, and be able to engage. But what about are those the youth that you pay most attention to versus other youth? And how does that play out in the work that you do? So for the ones who don't typically come to programming, how do you reach those clients? Are there non-traditional ways of doing that outreach? And are you pursuing alternative ways to reach those who are further from accessing your service? Sometimes this looks like, and I know COVID has come and sort of change the dynamics of all of that, but sometimes this looks like just showing up in a ball court and just sitting down and introducing yourself to one youth and starting a conversation and saying who you are and what you do and what your interests are, and really building a rapport with them. And as you do that, that begins to grow like wildfire, actually, with the rest of them. But in terms of like programs that may also already serve youth, just showing up in their Zoom call, showing up in their Zoom meeting, showing up in their Zoom programming, is that a possibility to do outreach? So you're sitting in the room and you're getting to know, and you're building that rapport that way. And then also, have you used all your power and access to power to support the success of all your clients in the same way? So we as service providers, we know that we have access to a lot of different services and supports. A lot of times, we, even in the program that I run, a lot of times we decide who, I see a lot of people who decide who certain services should be given to based on their ability to access the program in a way that allows them to be vocal about it. And then you'll hear about other youth who, I didn't really know that was a service. And some of our leaders will say, well, you didn't ask. And I'll say, well, did you ask them? Did you ask what their needs were? Did you go further in saying, I have all this access to all of these services. I want to offer it. And if you don't need it, you don't need it. But have I taken the opportunity to do that? And then it's also letting go of your power. So I remember when I started speaking to the youth in my program, and one of the first cohorts we did a year and a half ago, I opened up the first session, and we had a bunch of young men who came in, like I said, from all over the city, was very shy, didn't want to say anything, didn't know anybody, didn't know me, so was very timid in sort of opening up. And I remember starting conversations saying, this is not my platform. So I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to allow all y'all to speak, because we are about to share the space. We are about to share our power. And I had to literally sit back and say, I'm going to give you all the power to allow you to move in this space the way how you feel comfortable. If the programming that we have provided for today is not going to work with how you want to move in the space, then that's what we're going to do. But we're going to allow you all to find the power that you do have, and to be able to lead the space as we move through it. And every single session, that is exactly what I do. I allowed them to, whether it's a program, it's a program that we have developed and it has structure and all of that. But sometimes it's just, we're not doing that today. We're going to talk about what is important to you. We're going to talk about what is on your mind, and we're going to talk about how we can influence what is going on in your life. And so sometimes letting go of that power, the need to have to say, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, and this is where we're going to do it, is important. So just to recap, how have you defined your community and how you fit in it? As you identify clients, participants whose voice is being heard, whose voices are more prominent, and whose voices are you not hearing? Similarly, which clients are you engaging? Are the clients you're engaging ones that are easy to access? The clients you are not engaging but need assistance? Are there others who can support your engagement? Who's in your network? Parents, whether it's parents, family members, friends, whatever that is, who are others that can support your engagement and the success of that individual? And in order to adequately support your client, it's extremely important you establish a trusting relationship. And again, this is going to take time, and it's going to be an investment. Investment of your time, your energy, your love, your support, your commitment, your passion, all of that. I'm just going to go briefly into building better reciprocal relationships. And building better reciprocal relationships is really about engagement. That's all it is. It's really how we engage. I love to talk about this, because this is what changed my life after I lost my son. I didn't realize that there was a restorative approach to how I engage with the world after I lost my son. As you can very well imagine, I was going through a deep depression when I lost my son, drinking heavily, suicidal attempts on a daily basis, wasn't able to drive, wasn't allowed to drive because I was having thoughts of crashing my car into the guardrails half the time. So it was something that I discovered. The first thing that I realized was that I didn't have any hate or wanted any harm to come to the young person who killed my son. I immediately started to think, what did this young person go through to be able to take the life of another young person? There must have been something that tragically happened within this young person's life to get him to that point. And so I didn't realize at the moment that was a restorative thought. How is it that I was going to help restore this young person? It is still a dream of mine at some point to be able to meet this young person, whoever he is. I really don't know. But it is a dream of mine to say, you know what, I am okay with what happened, and I'm okay with you. And if there's anything that I need to do to support the existence of the rest of your living, I would do that, because I no longer can do that for my son. And so that really is what restorative is. It's really building a space to rebuild relationships, to restore trust and hope, and to create change. It's really a place of, it's not a principle, it's a way of being. It's how we act and react to one another. And we practice that each and every day. It creates a space to heal harm and build deep, trusting relationships, which is very important with the participants that you all work for. And why is this an engagement that I believe in? Is because safe relationships are key to overcoming challenges of broken trust or unestablished trust. It is, if I can't trust you, I can't trust the process. And that is really true. if I have not been able to understand why you are here, why I should welcome you into my life, why I should welcome you into my safe space, why I should be able to trust you enough that I should tell you what the things that I'm going through, then the process that you work through with this client is never going to be a positive one. You'll always hit roadblocks along the way. And so 2 things that I think should be the first questions that we ask is, you must be able to identify the importance of having a reciprocal relationship. How important is it? And who is it important to? And why is it important? Sometimes when we think that we have this job, this is what we do, this is what we're getting paid to do, so we have to do it. Or we have to do it because we have to save people, or we have to do it because we have to make people better, or we have to do it because it's something that, you know, the world says we should do. But why? Why? And it really is a deeper look as to, am I doing what I'm doing for me? Am I doing what I'm doing because this is what my job is? Am I doing what I'm doing because I want to feel better about myself in the world? Why is it that I'm doing this? Is it about me or is it about them? And then we must have a plan and a process to engage when speaking about building relationships. There is a process, and that is really to be able to go through real, meaningful, timely engagement. The first thing that happens when we talk about restorative practice is to identify your own biases, your own power, and your own privileges. Many of us do not realize how this impacts clients, because clients see how we think about them. It's in our body language, it's in our eyes, it's in how we approach, it's in our voice, it's in our language. And so the first thing that we need to do is address those privileges and those biases. I know just recently I was walking in Jane and Finch with my sister, and we were walking just along Jane and Finch on the side road there, and there was this woman in her car, and as soon as we walked by, she locked the car door and took her purse off of the front seat. And so we were women. I mean, it was in the middle of the day, but we saw that, and it made us think, like, what are the thoughts that you have about us, why you would think that would be necessary to do? I mean, you know, there's no threat on us. There's nothing that says that we would ever do her any harm. But because of, I guess, previous biases or whatever it is, she assumed that she had to put herself in a safer space. And also, many of us don't recognize how their own understanding of certain groups impacts the way they engage. I know a lot. I do a lot of work with young people, young Black men and boys specifically. A lot of times, I remember when I used to when my kids were younger, and I used to pack up my little minivan. I used to take them all to Mandarin, and I took them to it was about 12 of them one night to Mandarin. In outside of Jane and Finch, and these are young men who's never really been outside of Jane and Finch. They don't go past their territory. And I brought all of them there, and then, mind you, they're all dressed in black. They're all just doing their thing. And we walked in there, and the entire as we walked in there, everybody in there started to move towards the walls, and they saw that, and they were like, they all call me mom. They were like, Mom, what's up with this? And I'm just like, you know what? We're going to ignore this because we're going to sit and we're going to eat and we're going to be welcomed in this space. And I have to tell you, it was the most uncomfortable dinner I have ever had in my entire life. And it was uncomfortable because I didn't know how one of them were going to react to how they were being treated. And I also didn't know how the servers and all of them were going to react to serving them. And you can see the tension around the dinner table. You can see the tension as the servers came to serve them. And so again, recognizing, the groups that we engaged, or do we have any internal biases that we need to address as we're working with them? And it's important to be very honest about that. And just quickly addressing your privileges and power, ask yourself, am I doing enough? Is there more that I can do? What access do I have to information? What is my social placement, and how might that affect the work I do? Which is very important. We all have a different social placement. And if we don't recognize that, we will not be able to do impactful work. And then also addressing your biases. What is preventing me from engaging participants from these harder to reach spaces? And what is preventing me from building a trusting relationship with my clients? Some of the concerns that you may have in terms of engaging would be, fear of engaging. am I able to trust this young person? He just came out of jail. He was just charged for murder. He was just charged for gun violence, whatever it is. Am I able to trust this person? And then not sure how to engage. I don't know how to engage a young person I can't necessarily relate to, or not feeling comfortable to engage. And probably saying to yourself, you know what, I don't know what to say to this person. I don't know how to approach this person. I don't know what to do in a situation where they come at me with a racist comment or anything like that. Are some of those things that we need to work through in terms of our own social space. And then my good friend said this to me the other day, COVID is a great equalizer. Apparently this has been something that has been said, but is it? The reality is that everything that we're speaking about today has exacerbated the issues that your clients are facing in this moment. And that depends culturally, socially, geographically. All of that has been, as we've seen, has changed. And so this is a time where more restorative connections and relationships need to be built. Mental health is huge. I will talk to you from a space where I suffer mental health. I do suffer mental health from the loss of my son. And I can't tell you how relationships and meaningful relationships carry me through my days, each and every day. So just to put that there. And there I am. So are there any questions? And if not, I would really love to hear about your own real life situations situations where you wanted to engage but didn't know how, or anything like that.
Thank you, Symone. I'm sure there are going to be questions, but maybe I'll start off. And one thing that has come up in our smaller groups that have, in maybe a previous presentation, was around agencies' relationships with the police, right? And especially when you're working with clients who have difficult or engagements with the law, how do you think about that kind of relationship with the police?
Yeah, I mean, that is a strained one, I think, for most people, especially those of us who have been negatively impacted by the police. I can tell you that when I lost my son, my interactions with the police were extremely violent. I was actually a victim, and they treated me as a perpetrator. I almost thought I was the one that killed my son, how I was being treated by them. But it really is having those conversations and asking those tough questions. It really is about making sure that, whatever it is that's happening, what is it that you need to put across to them to understand certain things? How can you be that ally? How can you make sure that you are helping to shield that person, that young person, in a way that is keeps them from being harmed? And again, how far are you willing to go? How much are you willing to impact? How much are you willing to do within reason, of course? A lot of my young people, as you probably know, working with young people in Jane and Finch, have been impacted by police all throughout their life. And for me, I really have to put aside my own biases about police and say, at this moment, I have to make sure that I keep my young people safe. I have to be the one to have this conversation. I have to be the one to de-escalate whatever is happening. And I have to make sure that I am able to translate to them what is really going on with this young person, so I can be helpful in the situation.